Good afternoon. Welcome to day 2 of the 10th Breastfeeding Congress with the theme Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success, Creating Systems for Lactation Support. Before we begin, we would like to remind everyone of our house rules. First, please accomplish the evaluation forms and post-test after the last session of today's Congress. Second, there will be a designated time for question and answer after each session. And third, we will have 3 simultaneous sessions after the plenary lectures, allowing you to choose the one that aligns best with your interests. You may access the other simultaneous sessions on demand via Docquery 1 week after the Congress. To introduce our moderator for the plenary sessions, we gladly introduce Dr. Leia Patricia Arcea Placena. Dr. Placena graduated from the UP College of Medicine and took her residency in pediatrics and fellowship in pediatric cardiology at the Philippine General Hospital, where she currently serves as the training officer. To moderate the second plenary session, let us welcome Dr. Leia Placena.
Hey everyone, welcome to the second day of our Breastfeeding Congress. I am Dr. Leia Placena, a pediatric cardiologist, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's plenary session. We have quite an interesting series of lectures lined up for you today. To start off day 2 of the Congress, we have 3 distinguished speakers to present how UPPGH, as a national university hospital, promotes breastfeeding. Allow me to introduce Dr. Stella Marie Jose, Dr. Aurora Gloria Labadia, and Ms. Gloria Almariego. Our first speaker is a graduate of Doctor of Medicine at the University of the Philippines. She had her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at the Philippine General Hospital. She had a master's degree in health profession education and also attended a training course in lactation management education program in WellStart International, San Diego, California, USA. Currently, she is the head of the Expanded Education and Training at the Philippine General Hospital, chair of the Curriculum Committee at the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, and chair of the Subcommittee on Breastfeeding of the Philippine Obstetrical and Gynecological Society. Let us all give a virtual round of applause for Dr. Stella Marie Jose. Our next speaker is a graduate of the Doctor of Medicine at the Far Eastern University Nicanor Reyes Medical Foundation. She had her residency training in pediatrics and fellowship training in newborn medicine at the Philippine General Hospital. She had her observership in neonatal and perinatal medicine in Wayne State University in Michigan, USA, and observership in human milk bank operations at the Mayor's Hospital in Florence, Italy, and NHS Greater Glasgow in Scotland. She is currently the head of the Lactation and Human Milk Bank Center of the Philippine General Hospital, chair of the Department of Pediatrics Adventist Medical Center, clinical associate professor at the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, and training officer of the Division of Newborn Medicine of the Philippine General Hospital. She is a volunteer of the Kalusugan ng Mag-ina program, and she also is the overall chair of this 10th Breastfeeding Congress. Dear colleagues, let us all welcome Dr. Aurora Gloria Labadia. Our third speaker for this lecture series is a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Nursing at Arellano University. She had her master's degree in nursing at the Philippine College of Health Sciences and postgraduate certificate in healthcare leadership and management at the Asian Institute of Management. She is currently the chief of the Division of Clinical Nursing Operations, co-chair of the Breastfeeding Committee, and co-chair of Disaster Risk Reduction and Management at the Philippine General Hospital. Dear colleagues, let us all welcome our third speaker, Ms. Gloria Almariego.
Like seeds from a tree, we have to plant them early. You know that doctors and nurses, they have to learn too, so that when they give birth, they can breastfeed their babies too, and not only for our patients.
I'm Dr. Gap Legaspi. I'm a neurosurgeon, director of the Philippine General Hospital since 2016 to current. At ang aking eksperyensya sa mother-baby friendly hospital ay nag-umpisa nung first week ng aking pagka-director. Dahil yun ang aming accreditation noong January 2016. And I'm happy to announce that we were accredited shortly thereafter, January 18, 2016. And since then, considering that we considered our landmark achievement in our mother and baby care, and have instituted different measures to solidify the program of making PGH a mother-baby friendly hospital. Siyempre, unang-una, walang milk formula. So, even during the COVID times, very challenging ang breastfeeding, natuloy pa rin ang pag-implement ng no milk formula in the hospital. Meron nga akong biro sa mga accreditors noon, yung aming mga metal detector, hindi para sa baril at kutsilyo, kundi para sa lahatan ng gatas. Kung may ipapasok sila, madidetect. But seriously, I think the programs that we have implemented to make sure that that breastfeeding is a primary feeding procedure or process for our babies is still being carried out as mandated by the government. Meron lang mga challenges na dumating, pero ito yung mga nalagpasan. Katulad ng COVID times, nagkaroon kami ng 50% decrease ng acquisition ng mother's milk sa aming sa breast milk donation program. At understandably, dahil to sa limitation ng mobility rin ng mga tao. Pero naka-recover na doon dahil maraming programa ang nagawa before and after COVID at na-ensure na right after COVID na tuloy. Ang mga programa to, unang-una, naglaan kami ng lugar sa Ward 15 para sa mga lactating mothers, either hindi lang mag-feed kundi para mag-contribute din ng breast milk. At kasama na rin ang aming mga employees, meron silang mga lactation areas for breastfeeding. Ang aming pasteurizer ay na-augment ng additional capacity to 20 liters. 20 liters, I think, at meron pang darating na mga donation for pasteurizers. Bumili kami ng hiwalay na sasakyan, isang van for farther areas at isang parang tricycle for nearer areas, mas maliliit na kalye, mapapasok para mas madali kumuha. So these interventions, I think, ensured that we were able to contribute to the volume or the inventory of breast milk, not only for PGH but hopefully for other hospitals around us. Ang isang patunay nito, nung Ondoy, nakita ko ang ating mga staff sa lactation unit na nasa Villamor Air Base. Nagdala sila ng gatas, nagdala sila ng refrigerator doon at mga gatas galing PGH para sa mga batang ulila, namatay ang nanay at kailangan ng breast milk. So, I think yung ganong lawak ng naaabot ng PGH lactation unit, patunay na binibigyan ng importansya talaga ito. So, sa loob at labas ng hospital, ng Philippine General Hospital, I think our program is being able to achieve what it has planned for itself, yung mga objectives na dinagay sa during the organization part para maging mas effective at efficient yung mother-baby friendly programs natin. Gusto ko rin magpasalamat sa lahat nating mga champions, no? Pinangunahan ni Dr. Stella Jose at ni Dr. Aula Badia, ang ating mga champions sa medical part at si Mrs. Glo Almariego sa nursing part, na ating mga partners to ensure that the programs continue and even flourish as time passes. Malaki ang benepisyo ng programang ito at I'd like to believe lifelong. Kasi pag magandang umpisa ng nutrition ng isang bata, panghabang buhay ang benepisyo nito. So I'd like to thank the whole team for staying the course and continuing the program, our mother-baby friendly program.
My name is Dr. Estela Marie Jose. I'm the POGS Subcommittee on Breastfeeding Chair and also the co-chair of the Breastfeeding Committee of the Philippine General Hospital. I am privileged to give to you this talk on the promotion of breastfeeding in a national university hospital. Okay, so the Breastfeeding Committee was started in 1994 by our chairman, Dr. Natividad Bertoliano, and the co-chair for services then is Dr. Norberto Hoxon. So in 1994, it was established, and as a young consultant then, I was a member of that committee. Now, later on, in 1996, we were sent to the United States as scholars, as a UNICEF USAID scholar. Me together with Dr. Juliet Shaw Aguilar and our chief nurse, Ms. Del Andaya, we went to California to study breastfeeding. So we had the training of the trainers then, and we stayed in the US for 5 weeks. And this is courtesy of the UP College of Medicine also. Upon return to the Philippines, we applied here what we studied in the US. And so we had the lactation management training, which we offered for the residents and fellows and consultants. Later on, we had the Scorpio, which is the actual return demo of the steps in breastfeeding. We sent two healthcare workers, Dr. Aurora Libadia and Ms. Rachel Rodriguez, to Australia to study this. And upon their return, it was included in our lactation management training. We had the human milk bank, and I'm very grateful to all those who donated in our milk bank, specifically the Phi Lambda Delta sorority and the Rotary Club of Makati. So the Rotary Club donated one pasteurizer for us. So besides the pasteurizer from PGH, we had another one. And we are very grateful to them for this. And that pasteurizer is still being used up to now. We continued our lactation management training. So we do it 3 times a year. Believe it or not, 3 times a year. We have different audiences every time. And instead of for lactation management trainings, the 1 month there during August is the breastfeeding week celebration, and we have that every year since 1996, and we never stop. So for us, it's just part of our life to teach our residents, fellows, and students. During the pandemic, we still continued with the lactation management training, but this time it is online. So we have the lectures, and then again we have the return demo, or the Scorpio later on. Last year, we had the re-accreditation of the breastfeeding committee of the hospital. Okay, so we were visited by DOH and we successfully were accredited by the DOH. And that is a big, big advantage, big trophy for us because it's very hard to be accredited by DOH. They look at all the papers. So for example, you are saying that there's direct latching on of the baby when the baby is delivered. They really look at the DR, delivery room, to see if it is done. And they have that master list to check it all. The lactation management training is being given to first-year residents of the obstetrics and pediatrics department, and also we also invite the anesthesiologists and other members of the PGH community. And this is given usually before they start their residency training program. And then the Scorpio, which we started giving this to the LU5 students. So LU5 are the clinical clerks, no? In other schools that they call it the clinical clerks, and it is given during the clinical clerkship period. And for the reaccreditation, we were pediatrics and the OBGYN department hand in hand together with the nursing division. They were all responsible for the reaccreditation of PGH as a breastfeeding, as a mother-baby friendly hospital initiative in breastfeeding. So it is a joint effort of many departments, and also the nursing service. We realize the importance of the nursing service because they are the people on the ground. So, for example, we teach this to our residents, and the residents teach the patients, but in the wards, it is the nurses who really guide the patients, and they are really very helpful to our program, the breastfeeding community program of the PGH. Education is the key to breastfeeding. So we never abandoned that concept. And so now we included the lactation management training lectures in the first year medical students curriculum. So OB, obstetrics and gynecology lectures, we included that, and also pediatrics. So we are in harmony with our counterpart, the pediatrics department. And for all of those of you listening here, many of you are directors of your hospital or teachers, professors in the medical schools. You include the lactation management training and breastfeeding in your lectures because like seeds from a tree, we have to plant them early. You know that doctors and nurses, they have to learn too so that when they give birth, they can breastfeed their babies too, and not only for our patients. As a senior faculty of the Philippine General Hospital and the UP College of Medicine, I would like to give this short advice to all the doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals out there. Breastfeeding is essential to life. You as doctors, patients look up to you, and so you yourself, the nurses and the doctors, should learn how to breastfeed. It is like walking the talk. You cannot just discuss this, but you yourself, you have not breastfed. So personally, I breastfed all my 4 children, and I did not rest at 9 months. Two of my kids, I breastfed them for a long time, like 2 years and more. Okay, so because I teach this and I also do it, and I think that's how it should be. Thank you very much for your attention.
I am Aurora Gloria Engilio Libadia. I'm the head of the UPPGH Lactation Unit and the Human Milk Bank Center. The Philippine General Hospital is the largest tertiary state-owned hospital and operated by the University of the Philippines. We serve the poorest of the poor, and we take care of sick newborns or premature babies who requires require subspecialty level of care. So how did it started? It was the time of Dr. Amelia Fernandez, the head of the chair of the Department of Pediatrics, and Dr. Joson, who were sent by the Department of Health to San Diego, California, where they had their training, lactation course, and when they returned, there was a refrigerator sent by the Department of Health to the Philippine General Hospital, and when we started to collect and store breast milk for their newborns and also the milk for the babies in the wards. And with the great efforts and under the leadership of our mentors, the late Dr. Pura Flor Isleta and our mentor, Dr. Maria Asuncion Silvestre, they established the lactation unit and the human milk bank in Philippine General Hospital. Human milk bank is a service in screening, collecting, processing, pasteurizing. The pasteurizer, it kills, inactivates all the bacteria, viruses, pathogens that can result in neonatal sepsis and HIV that would ensure the safety and quality of the donor milk or the breast milk. And it is also a service in distributing and prioritizing who would be the recipients of the breast milk. We have 2 human milk banks here in PGH, one in Ward 15 that's near the maternity ward, and the other one is in 4th floor that is near the NICU. Before the pandemic, we had 7,000 live births in a year, and 85 to 90% of them are service patients. And we make sure that all our newborns will receive only human milk that is a source of unparalleled immunoprotection and optimal nutrition for our sick babies in the NICU as well as our premature babies. It's been very challenging to sustain a human milk bank, and we are so fortunate that the administration, the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, our Department of Pediatrics and the Division of Newborn Medicine, the nursing service, and the mother support groups, our patients, the private donors who have been supporting us and have been the source of our donors of the human milk bank. We do milk drive and milk letting activities in Metro Manila, in Quezon City, Manila, Las Piñas, Parañaque, and San Juan, Taguig, and as well as in Laguna, Calamba, and Santa Rosa, and in Cavite. So as of now, currently we have mother support groups and private donors, and the milk drive, the milk letting activities set by the LGUs like the Manila City Health Office and other LGUs. During the time of Yolanda, we set through the efforts of Dr. Mian Silvestre, we had this Nanay Bayanihan with support of other mother support group like Breastfeeding Pinay and the Latch Philippines and the Arugaan, and the private donors and mothers and neonatologists, volunteers, and also the breastfeeding committee in PGH were there supporting the mothers, the victims of the typhoon, the victims of the Taal volcano eruption in Cavite. So we were able to send fellows and nurses from the human milk bank staff and breastfeeding committee to support them. So we have human milk bank, but it's just we don't automatically distribute this pasteurized donor milk to the victims, but we provide emotional, mental support, and for the public, huwag matakot, mag-breastfeed ka during the time of pandemic, regardless of maternal COVID status, as long as we implement the IPC measures. hand washing and wearing face masks. So we also made a Mahal Kong Ina breastfeeding guide supporting these mothers. Wag mo po ako bigyan ng formula kasi ayoko pong magkasakit at gusto ko maraming ipon ang ating pamilya, and the when to feed the baby, the feeding cues, the correct positioning and attachment, the collection, storage, and cup feeding. Ang dami kong natutunan dito. Hindi ko man naramdaman, pero upon reading the history, so I read about Dr. Amelia Fernandez and the group, just a small refrigerator that was the start of collection and giving breast milk to the mothers of our babies in the ward or in the NIC. So that is dramatic to me, just a small refrigerator from the Department of Health. And I was able to witness the efforts of Dr. Silvestre and the late Dr. Pura Floristilla, how they were able to establish the human milk bank. Saludo ako sa lahat ng mga nagdo-donate po ng human milk para sa lahat ng human milk bank, and I encourage people also or your hospital to establish human milk bank. And yung natutunan ko din, if you're creating a breastfeeding committee, make sure the head would be an obstetrician, and our co-chair is also the head of the nursing service, and a support from the admin. No? So everything would be smoothly. We would be able to accomplish our goals and contribute in decreasing neonatal and maternal death in the country.
Ako po si Gloria Almariego, Nurse 7 ng PGH, Chief ng Division of Clinical Nursing Operations. Ako rin po ang co-chair ng breastfeeding ng committee ng PGH. Nag-start po kami ng maging baby-friendly hospital noong 1993. It was fortunate na granted kami ng DOH. In sometime 2011, we faced challenges kasi ang DOH sila na to accredit again to be mother-baby friendly. We have to submit yung documents and also pass the ocular inspection para ganon mabigyan kami ng certificate of commitment. This will last for 2 years in preparation for accreditation ng baby-friendly hospital. Kaya dito nag-start yung aming challenges talaga. Kasi we have to comply with the 10 steps to successful breastfeeding. Nakalagay din doon na we have to orient almost at least 80% ng personnel. You know, ang personnel namin dito, total personnel is 4,300, including the outsource, yung security and janitorial. Kaya we double time na lecturing for 4 hours sa lahat ng at least we have oriented 80%, about 3,000. And another thing, pangalawa, prohibiting yung feeding bottle dito sa atin. Talaga mahirap. From security, kailangan walang feeding bottle. Dati akala namin ng committee, para lang dun sa neonates. But unfortunately, nung ang DOH, ang assessor, na sabi, lahat, even the OPD, kailangan wala kayong feeding bottles. Even yung mga 5 years old na dapat hindi na feeding bottles. Dapat yan, cup feeding sila. Kaya medyo mahirap yon, pero natugunan naman namin na wala talagang feeding bottle dito sa hospital. Noong una talagang hesitant yung mga nursing personnel dahil ang babies namin sa neonatal ICU, nagre-range ng 60 to 80 na neonates. Ang dami noon para ika-feed nila isa-isa. Hindi pa sila natatapos dito, umiiyak na ulit yun nandito sa pinag-umpisahan nila. Kaya yun ang medyo nahirapan kami, talagang kailangan namin sa mga personnel na kailangan talagang magka-feed, talagang tatanggalin ang bote. Kaya nung time na yon talaga, medyo hirap, pero naging masaya din kami kasi nag-comply din, sinunod din ng mga nursing personnel, tulong-tulong kami. Ultimo ang chief nurse nagka-feed. na admin siya, pero tumutulong siya para sa ganun mag-comply kami dun sa breast milk ang pinapaano namin, ang pinapainom sa lahat ng babies. Kaya nakatulong siya, naging masaya din naman, masaya yung mga empleyado dahil alam namin na para to sa mga babies na future natin sa susunod na henerasyon. Ang training talaga namin yung sa OB at saka PEDYA, resident personnel, lahat dyan. Ultimo janitor, kasama yan sa training namin. Kaya maganda din naman. Fortunately, after that, matagal kami nag-orient, mga one year kami na in-comply namin lahat to. Fortunately, nung January 18, dito ng 2012, with much delight, we received the accreditation ng DOH. Puro kulay green na smiley sa DOH. Kaya ang nag-gain ng hospital natin dito, nag-decrease yung number ng admission ng nursery kasi lahat ng babies nag-room in na, nandun na sa mga nanay, nasa ward na, naka-room in lahat. Tapos, nagkaroon din sa cost-effective din dahil hindi na kami bumibili, ang PGH hindi na bumibili ng formula milk para sa mga babies. Breast milk lahat ang ginagamit dito. For our diet, they begin bonding at once pagkatapos ng panganak, nasa dibdib na nila yung babies nila. Kaya mas maganda yung bonding ng mother at saka ng baby. Kaya yung health ng mother at saka baby, well promoted siya.
I am Dr. Van Torres Tigzon, a pediatric consultant here in the Philippine General Hospital. So my breastfeeding journey started way back in 2013 when I had my first baby. And it continues until now, so it has been already a decade. So 10 years na po now that it's 2023.
My name is Bea Ocampo Santos. I'm a second-year allergy fellow of PGH. And I'm a mother of 2 babies. I have a 1-year-old and I have a 5-month-old. My personal experience about breastfeeding is I'm actually very lucky. I think I had an easy time breastfeeding. I didn't have problems with milk supply. Both my babies were able to latch very well. But I think the main problem or the main difficulty I had with breastfeeding is breastfeeding while working, especially here as a healthcare worker, being a doctor in PGH.
Hello, ako po si Armia Timbol, isa po akong first year pedia resident dito sa PGH. So, share ko lang po yung mga experiences ko for breastfeeding. So, I'm a mom of 2 po, 8 years old and 2 years old. So, sa first baby ko is actually mixed feeding ako noong una because wala ko masyadong alam pa or experience with the breastfeeding. But with the guidance of my pediatrician, tsaka OB namin, so with my second baby, doon na talaga nag-early breastfeeding ako for siguro 1.5 year.
I'm Charity Santos and I'm a third-year pediatrics resident here at PGH. As a doctor and a first-time mom, it really has been a challenge engaging in breastfeeding. It really is different when what one teaches and what one practices. So far my breastfeeding journey has really been wonderful and empowering for me, though it has not been without its challenges as mentioned.
My name is Corinne Pilotin.
And my name is Joshua Pilotin.
I'm the mom of Elora Sky and Luna Eliana. So we have been married actually for 4.5 years na, and it took us quite some time bago kami nabuntis. But we praise God kasi even if twin pregnancy siya, even if preterm yung pregnancy, ngayon very healthy na sila. They are 32-week babies. Pero ngayon, turning 3 months na sila on August. So very healthy babies. We have very healthy babies. Strong babies.
So it was not easy since I am a working mom here in PGH, but I am really grateful because the PGH has the creche daycare. So it's a daycare for small kids of children of UP Manila and PGH employees. I am able to pump and latch my baby every 2 to 3 hours since PGH is just near the daycare. It's just a walking distance away. I am also able to store my breast milk there since there is a refrigerator. Whenever I am outside the Philippine General Hospital for meetings or other activities, I used to bring my breastfeeding baby with me as much as I can so I can still continue to breastfeed. And so it is very understandable that my bonding with my kids are very strong.
Being a fellow in PGH, we have to go on duties, we still have to do our rounds. We still have to see patients in the outpatient clinic, in the inpatient referrals. So, thinking about that and thinking about my 3-month-old at home when I first got back to PGH, I had to think about the timing of my breast pumping, how to keep up my milk supply, because I was very worried that I would run out of milk for my baby. So, a lot of the time, I would have to wake up in the middle of the night to just continue pumping. So, even if my baby is not awake, I will still wake up to continue pumping. So until now, I haven't had good night's rest in maybe 2 years or so. Even during the day, I'm always aware of what time it is and what time I last pumped, so that I know that, okay, in 30 minutes, I have to finish this patient so that I can pump again.
At first talaga mahirap siya. Okay, lalo na kapag kapapanganak lang, hindi talaga lumalabas agad yung milk or marami siya. So, ang advice sa akin nung pedya at that time was, huwag mong isipin na walang lumalabas na milk, meron siya. As long as yung baby mo is nabigyan ng weight, nakakapag-pupo, and then nakakawiwi, okay siya. So, may milk.
When I go through my duties or sometimes extending 24 to 36 hours, I realized that it really takes commitment and sacrifice of your time and energy when you do breastfeeding. Although I may not be with my baby all the time or most of the time actually, I practice pumping here at the hospital. And then it really takes also a support system to go through this journey. And I'm really thankful for my family at home and my co-residents here who support me with my journey.
Nagpa-pump lang ako because I was encouraged to express para may milk sila na nanggagaling sa akin. So, si Josh would go here sa PGH every day para dalhin yung na-pump ko for the day para yun yung supply nila ng milk for every day. So, until dumating yung time na na-room in na sila, actually, nung first day na na-room in sila, naging struggle sa akin kasi napuyat, so walang lumalaba. I mean, super duper konti. And time na ng feeding nila, so crunch time. Kasi, parang dalawa sila eh. So, hindi lang isa yung sinusuplayan ko, dalawa. So, nahihirapan ako nung una kasi napupuyat pa kami. So, kasi tig-isa kami.
And so, I realized that this breast milk, which others would call liquid gold, is really a blessing from God, and I hope our dear parents would also be encouraged to actually breastfeed because it saves them money, it allows them to bond with their children, and it allows them to have a healthier body because of this breastfeeding. So maraming salamat po. I hope that you got some points from this and you'll be inspired to breastfeed and encourage others to breastfeed also.
Breastfeeding is such a nice bonding experience, but it's not something that you can fully understand until you do it yourself. Until you experience it yourself. Like you're looking at your baby and your baby is feeding from you. I remember a particular time when I just got back to work from maternity leave. That was Mother's Day pa. The first time my baby did not want to feed from me. I felt so bad. I felt like I'm a mom who could not deliver what I'm supposed to be giving my son. Buti na lang, after a few days of trying to get him to feed again from me, he was able to feed again, and so now we have no problems. But that kind of connection that you have looking at your baby, and your baby looking at you, grappling for your shirt, trying to hold your bra or whatever, parang it's such a nice feeling. And even until now, my 1-year-old, every night before she sleeps, she'll suck her thumb and hold my brow, which I find also comforting, I guess, for her, and also comforting for me. It also helps me relax and go to sleep also.
Lagi na sinasabi, Dok, walang tumutulog. walang lumalabas. So, very important po yung health teaching. Malaman na nila na talagang maliit lang yung tiyan ng baby. So, it's okay na sa unang mga araw, halos wala kang makitang patak na lumalabas. Pero pag nag-hand express naman, meron, di ba, minsan? So, it's okay. Talagang ang breastfeeding is more of supply and demand. So, the more na nagbe-breastfeed yung si baby, nasa-stimulate yung breast, mas more na may maproproduce na milk yung ating breast. So, yun yung lagi ko sinasabi sa kanila.
Yung husband dapat supportive siya sa asawa niya kasi kung hindi siya supportive, wala parang mas lalong mag-i-struggle. So, mas lalong may stress. Lalong bababa yung output ng milk. Yun.
Correct. Right choice na
PGH.
PGH. Hindi siya out of promotion, pero right choice siya. Kasi grabe alagaan. Sabi nga namin, pinag-uusapan namin na pakita namin, love na love talaga nila yung anak namin.
To encourage everyone for breastfeeding, it really is not an easy path, but you get this sense of fulfillment to give to your baby, and it only takes one step at a time. Your baby learns also from you, and you learn from the baby. That's why you just have to go through it and then enjoy the rest of the process.
Our second speaker for this afternoon's plenary is a graduate of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, and he also took up Masters of Science in Nutrition for Global Health at the London School of Medicine and Tropical Medicine in the United Kingdom. He is now the Regional Associate Director of Alive and Thrive East Asia Pacific. To discuss the key findings and recommendations of the Lancet 2023 series on breastfeeding, let us all give a round of virtual applause to Dr. Paul Zambrano.
Good day to all participants and to the organizers. Many thanks for this opportunity to share the summary findings of the Lancet Breastfeeding Series for 2023, which was published in February of this year. Let me start by saying I have no conflicts of interest to declare. I am currently a salaried employee of the Alive and Thrive initiative in East Asia and Pacific. First, I want to acknowledge the other authors of the series. We are 25 in total from 12 different countries. Now let's go to the heart of the findings. Infant feeding matters, and as part of that, breastfeeding is crucially important. And I think all of us in this convention know that very well. In 2016, the first Lancet series on breastfeeding described just why that is so. For those who may not be so familiar, breastfeeding has a very significant influence on human systems biology that has lifelong impact on health and development. It's true for infants in low, middle, and high-income countries alike. Breastfeeding also affects maternal health, reducing the risk of breast and ovarian cancer. At a simple, crude level, survival, the 2016 series highlighted that if all children were actually breastfed according to WHO recommendations, around 800,000 child deaths would be prevented every year. This series has come to be because over the past 20 years, infant feeding practices have changed. Globally, fewer than half of infants are fed according to WHO recommendations. A couple of points on terminology. In this presentation, I will use the term commercial milk formula instead of the more familiar term breast milk substitute. First, this is to highlight the artificial and ultra-processed nature of all these products, but also because the term substitute conveys the notion of equivalence. In the 2016 series and in this series, we show evidence that has strengthened our understanding and deepened our understanding about how vastly different commercial milk formula is from breast milk. Second, to clarify what we mean by marketing, we refer to any form of commercial communication or activity that's designed or has the effect of increasing recognition, appeal, or consumption of a particular product. And this includes advertising, distribution, promotion, lobbying, and sponsorship. But this term does not include the transportation or sale of the product itself. So this is not about removing formula milk from the shelves or restricting access. This is all about the marketing practices. And I will say that while we focus on the commercial milk formula products, the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes covers related products such as bottles and teats. And there are 4 main messages that we want to distill out of this 2023 series. The first is that breastfeeding success is a collective responsibility. It is not the sole responsibility of women. There are many externalities that constrain the practices, however. If we want improved infant feeding, then we need both policy and societal responses to support individual women and families. The second is that we want to take a deep dive into infant behaviors, like learning to walk or speak. Sleeping and crying have normal trajectories, but these behavioral cues are easily misinterpreted or reframed. The third is that formula milk marketing influences our beliefs, our values, and our practices. It has negatively changed the infant feeding ecosystem. However, the extent of influence and both the power of marketing and the power to market has not been fully appreciated by those in health and civil society and in government. Lastly, there are many constraints on women who decide to breastfeed, and it's the responsibility of government to implement structural interventions and policies to support breastfeeding and to mitigate negative undermining influences. So now we come to the first paper, the first of 3 in the series, which is breastfeeding is crucially important, but in an increasingly challenged market-driven world. The paper starts with a conceptual framework that depicts the interactions ranging from the political and economic, and especially the mother and infant relationships, and their impact on exclusive and continued breastfeeding. Paper 1 documents how these interactions drive practices and what are the required policies and interventions to support breastfeeding. Like any paper published in The Lancet, it is supported by robust methods: analysis of nationally representative surveys, systematic reviews, and case studies were utilized for Paper 1. And here are some of the insights from the paper. The first big message is about the late initiation of breastfeeding globally and the early introduction of pre-lacteal feeds. That is, the giving of liquids such as water or formula before starting breastfeeding. We see in the figure on the left, the blue horizontal bars represent the proportion of infants initiating breastfeeding within the first hour of life as recommended by WHO. Less than half of newborns are put to the breast within the first 60 minutes. These data come principally from low and middle-income countries because we don't have good data from high-income countries. But the probability is that these numbers would be even worse if we were to include that data. While the figure on the right, you can see that in all income settings, there is a clear correlation between the giving of any pre-lacteal feed and breastfeeding. Where you have higher rates of pre-lacteal feed, the top left-hand corner, you have low early rates of early initiation of breastfeeding on the x-axis, and this is associated with shorter duration of breastfeeding and increased consumption of commercial milk formula. As I mentioned, Paper 1 examines infant behaviors in a way few other publications have done. So the first thing to say is that human babies are born in an immature state. That's not a surprise to us, and especially for all the pediatricians who are with us today. But they remain in that immature physiologic and behavioral state for longer than just about any other primate. That means that there is a significant process of post-birth maturation. So it takes time and support for young babies to learn to feed, to settle, and to sleep. Sleep patterns of babies, as we all know, don't align with the patterns that we have as adults. As a father of 3 children, I know this very well. Newborns express their discomfort through crying, and that signals the need for help and for care. So crying is adaptive, and it communicates many needs, not just hunger. The problem is that for parents who are tired and anxious themselves, it is a very difficult time to understand and read those cues well. In a systematic review of reports from 22 countries, and different income levels, among healthy young infants, normal behaviors such as regurgitation or crying are common. At least 50% of infants 0 to 3 months regurgitate once a day. And the average time that normal babies cry or that parents label them to be fussy is about 2 hours each day. Those are understandably distressing for parents, but they are not abnormal. And consistently, this undermines parental self-efficacy. And so it's no surprise that women report how their infant behavior shapes their assessment of their own milk supply, and how the patterns of crying, fussiness, and poor sleep undermine their confidence. But it's not the mothers only, it's also the partners, family members, and health staff who misinterpret those cues. In these analyses, self-reported insufficient milk, or SRIM, is the single most common reason given by 45% of mothers globally for first introducing formula milk within the first 6 months, and by a third of mothers for actually stopping breastfeeding. The irony is that the same evidence shows how effective counseling and support really does help parents understand those normal behaviors and improve breastfeeding. The flip side is seeing how what is considered normal, in quotes, is being used as a marketing opportunity. New parents are legitimately concerned about those maturing baby behaviors, but maybe they aren't understanding all the cues. We documented how marketing frames these behaviors. The baby is crying too much, emphasis on too much. Babies are not sleeping because they are still hungry. And it presents these as abnormal, pathological, or that mothers are somehow inadequate. If you're not sure whether you have enough milk, then maybe your baby needs formula. If your infant has a rash or cries or is unsettled, maybe they have an allergy. These are all familiar interpretations of or familiar messages that come across from marketing materials. So these inferences, these innuendos are setting the stage to offer products as solutions for things like, quote, peace of mind or for certainty. And without skilled support and reassurance, parents change from breastfeeding to formula milk or from one formula to the other. What we see in a series of case studies, however, is that where countries make investments, they can improve breastfeeding rates. Countries such as Burkina Faso, Mexico, here in the Philippines and USA, we see a range of interventions, including creation of mother support groups, analyzing the landscape of policies to inform where new policies are needed, strong position statements from academics, extending paid maternity leave, and using data effectively can all result in improved breastfeeding rates. This then takes us into an examination of the marketing of formula products, which is paper 2 of the Lancet 2023 series. The title is provocative, a system to capture parents, community, science, and policy, but we think that this title is justified. The objective of this paper is to describe the marketing playbook and its influence on people, families, health professionals, and also the scientific and policy-making world. And again, multiple methods were used that are described more in the paper. And there are 3 major learning points from paper 2. The first is that marketing practices are multifaceted, they are sophisticated, and they are very well resourced. And because of that, they represent a powerful system of influence. And it's not just a matter of advertising here or a bit of lobbying there. Together, they come together to influence civil society, health professionals, and policy and regulatory environments. And this is a system made even more influential through digital systems. The marketing playbook for commercial milk formula is not actually all that different from what we see for other products, like rubber shoes, other foods, and drinks. What's different is that infant feeding has consequences for lifelong health and development, and marketing infringes on the rights of children and families. They also represent a violation of the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. Formula milk is the only food product for which the UN World Health Assembly, a representative of the world's member states, expressed their collective will and put down on paper recommendations to limit its marketing. And for many of us here, we know that this international code was turned by the government of Philippines into the law of the land through Executive Order 51. But we know that marketing has worked. It has been very successful over decades, and it has successfully reshaped individual, societal, even medical norms and values. As with paper 1, we started with the conceptual framework, And there's really only one point that I want to highlight for this paper, and it's right in the middle, that everyone is a target of marketing strategies. Individuals, health professionals, governments, politicians, we are all targets. And the objective is to shape our values and beliefs and to alter our decisions. On the left, there are two figures. The bottom figure shows how sales per capita of all formula products are increasing. These are not just the total sales over time, the past 15 years, it's sales per capita, the kilograms sold per infant. Across all four categories, standard formula, follow-on formula, growing up formulas or toddler milks, whatever they're called, specialized formulas that aim to target specific medical conditions, they are all increasing. And that's why we can say that more infants than ever are receiving these products. The top figure shows the relationship between breastfeeding rates and formula sales per capita. And the relationship is simple. Where you have higher rates of formula on the right of the x-axis, we see lower rates of breastfeeding at 12 months. In 2019, these data translate into annual sales of formula products to the tune of $55 billion. Now, there are many reasons for these changes, including preferences of families, work constraints of mothers, perceived insufficient milk as presented earlier, and poor support from the health system. But there's no doubt that marketing is a major influence as well. In our analysis of industry data, between 4 and 7% of annual sales are spent on marketing, and sometimes much more. That means for 2019, around $3.5 billion was spent by the industry on marketing. And we know that this is an underestimate because this does not include the money spent on lobbying, use of social media influencers, the sponsorship of health professionals, and other practices. As I said, the title of paper 2 is provocative, that marketing aims to capture parents and communities. However, let's step away from the data a little bit and listen to what the mothers actually have said. I'll show you some quotes from some of the 8,500 women in 8 countries who were interviewed about their experiences in marketing. I'm sure you will find their words familiar and how they reflect on marketing messages or what they feel has been suggested to them. For example, a mother in Mexico says that all these scientific acronyms such as DHA, you don't know what it is, but it sounds cool. It's supposed to be a nutrient that goes directly into the baby's brain. Let's listen also to the mother in Vietnam who believed that if I want to promote brain development or to make my child taller, then she has to purchase a specific formula. Their beliefs have been captured. Let's listen to the mother in South Africa who says that she liked the premium brand of commercial milk formula. The gold and expensive look conveys a sense of quality, that it was somehow unique, and that for that type of product, she is willing to pay a premium price, and her values have been captured. Let's listen to the mother from London sharing how ads popped up out of nowhere while she was presumably on a digital platform or on social media. Cookies are being used by the industry to identify when women are pregnant and anchoring a strategy of targeted messages as soon as a mother is in their system or in the algorithm as with child. Again, one example of the process of capture. And we see the same joined-up strategy in packaging. These are just illustrative mock-ups of actual packaging, but we know that these look very familiar and it won't take much effort to see actual examples in real life in our store shelves. Industry invests in the science of communication and semiotics. Everything is deliberate. The colors used, the scientific-looking emblems, the language of comfort, specially formulated for babies who are fussy, have colic, or crying, appealing to aspirations or parents' values, the great start, the gold color, the baby with glasses was going to be smarter. Everything, all these messages and all these elements and strategies are very deliberate. At a trade meeting in 2017, the CEO of one formula milk company said that infant nutrition wasn't necessarily about ingredients or innovation. What they were selling was sleep. Another panelist in the meeting said that they were selling peace of mind, presumably to parents who had anxieties or specific hopes. Now, for us in this conference, in this convention today, here is an important key message. Health workers, like us, are important targets. In marketing terms, we would be referred to as category entry points. If we're in the US and I say Michael Jordan, you would think Nike. If I say your favorite celebrity, you would probably think about the specific brands that they endorse. Health workers are important because in all regions, we are cited by families as being key informants about infant feeding. But sponsorship of health professionals, sponsorship of research, guidelines, and means of influence, which most health professionals and associations believe they are somehow immune to, still constitute a clear conflict of interest. We are major category entry points because, as we saw in the interviews of the 8,500 women, if a health worker recommends a formula product, then families are likely to follow that recommendation. The figure on the right, it's a figure of an echo chamber, which is part of a stakeholder mapping conducted in South Africa by a marketing company on behalf of a major formula producer, show that they position scientific and the academic community at the center of the echo chamber. And in the original version, which for many reasons we were not able to show, they even have names of specific individuals because they know that if they can influence this academic community, this association, this specific doctor of influence, they know that their influence can spread to other professional organizations and spread to the broader health community and ultimately affecting consumer behavior. Lastly, we say that marketing captures the policy and international recommendations too. None of this is happening in a vacuum, and international policy frameworks are being manipulated to decrease their effectiveness, and we see this in systematic reviews, case studies, and analysis of public access information. Earlier, I mentioned the International Code, which was agreed by the World Health Assembly in 1981. In the process of developing the code was in different ways blocked, reinterpreted, circumvented, or ignored, especially when countries attempt to convert this code into national law. The Philippines has a very rich history and experience with this very issue. The Codex Alimentarius, or the International Food Standards, is another critical and international regulatory framework that has been established to protect consumer health. And the evidence is clear that it has been manipulated by the industry to establish weaker standards or to establish standards that are less aligned with the international code when it comes to formula milk. In its marketing, industry capitalizes on the lack of implementation of maternity leave that enables breastfeeding. Again, highlighting that breastfeeding is a social responsibility and there are many factors. And we also see the effects of lobby groups as they influence policy environments that shift things in favor of shareholder interest. Again, it's increasingly rare to see the milk companies lobby themselves, but they use lobby groups that often have deceiving names, implying that they are somehow an authority on infant nutrition, but they are in fact working for the industry. To be clear, before we move to paper 3, marketing is not inherently bad, nor are these conclusions anti-profit. What we have pieced together is a more complete picture of marketing than just advertising or the occasional sponsorship of health workers. We see the effect of marketing on policy, on investment, and regulatory bodies. In particular, I want to highlight that a criticism of the industry and its marketing is not a criticism of women or families, their decision or circumstances. Nor, again, is this about trying to remove commercial milk formula from supermarkets and other retail platforms. But what we see is that industry deploys a system that is strategic, deliberate, very well resourced to turn the birth of an infant and the care of parents and families into a business opportunity. And this undermines breastfeeding and human rights. Now we go to paper 3, which is a political economy analysis that's organized using a specific framework. Now, for all of us who are not political economists in this room, I promise that I will try to go through this in a way that will help us better comprehend what's going on in the background that also affects the decision of women and families and fathers as well on infant feeding. So this is the conceptual framework for paper 3. I won't go through everything in detail, but I want to highlight a few points. At the top in gray, we have the tension between breastfeeding and commercial feeding and the direct impact of this tension on health and on social economic, and environmental outcomes that affect health indirectly. At the bottom, in the blue boxes, we have the political, economic, social, and technological structures of society, including institutions and its dominant ideas and beliefs, and the distribution of power and resource across society. So these are upstream or basic determinants. They are then linked to feeding practices and outcomes by looking at their influence on three domains of society labeled in the yellow box. The first is commerce, where, having described the power of marketing in paper 2, we look at the industry's power to market. Again, the power of marketing, and this is now the power to market. The second domain, care and work, focuses on gendered power systems and how society values breastfeeding. The third domain looks at why health systems still fail to effectively promote, protect, and support breastfeeding. Finally, and crucially, we look at the agency, mandates, interests, capabilities of different actors in both shaping and being shaped by the factors in the blue box, and their actions and policies and impact across the three domains. As with paper 1 and 2, paper 3 draws on extensive literature and on primary research that's been published elsewhere. So let's begin with the first domain. I've already described earlier the staggering growth of formula sales. What's also important to understand is that these markets are highly concentrated. 6 companies control over 60% of global markets. Furthermore, formula is highly profitable, with research pointing to profit margins in excess of 20%. These features of the market are important because they underpin the enormous economic power of formula companies. Indeed, collectively, the 4 biggest companies generate revenues greater than the GDP of all but 61 countries globally. They own assets that are more than the private wealth held in every African country except South Africa. The workforce of these companies, which excludes the employees of advertising companies and legal firms and lobby groups as previously mentioned, is bigger than the combined health workers of 3 countries, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Lesotho. Now, understanding the economic power of the industry is crucial not just because it underpins its marketing power, but because it also underpins a powerful and sophisticated political strategy in itself. This includes seemingly benevolent and public-facing corporate social responsibility activities aimed at purchasing social legitimacy and capital, and more covert action aimed at co-opting opponents and undermining implementation of the code. Much of this is carried out by extensive international and national lobbying groups that includes a variety of industry-funded front groups and food, beverage, and grocery manufacturer associations and the dairy industry. Efforts to curtail the regulation of marketing are also supported, especially in international trade forums such as Codex Alimentarius, by the formula and dairy-producing states, notably the United States, EU, Australia, and New Zealand. And we also described commercial milk formula industry involvement in multi-industry and multi-sectoral alliances to further corporate industry and corporate interests in general, including lobbying the US government to defund WHO while undermining WHO's public health mandate and scientific credentials even in the midst of the COVID pandemic. We have documented in detail much of these practices in the Philippines in a separate paper but is cited in the Lancet series. I invite you all to read it to get a better understanding of how these dynamics play out locally in our own country. I assure you, we are no exception. If the economic and political power of formula companies relative to governments, public health agencies, and children and mothers is a problem, which it is, we have to understand how that power is accrued and consider how it might be curtailed. Globalization and the integration of markets and supply chains is a part of the story of transnational corporate growth, but enhanced by neoliberal policy approaches that have privileged deregulation at the expense of public health, commodified and marketed more aspects of life, including the care of children, and expanded the power of finance capital and the drive to extract profits in ever more aggressive ways. International tax competition avoidance and abuse, coupled with ineffective antitrust measures, have also shifted power and resources away from people, parliaments, and regulatory bodies towards more transnational corporate and financial actors. Finally, formula companies are aided by the fact that the costs of not breastfeeding are externalized and paid for by others. This includes health-associated costs we are familiar with, but also the cause of considerable environmental damage from the plastic bottles and formula packaging and the additional greenhouse gas emissions involved in milk production, the manufacture and transportation of commercial milk formula. We also show how the increasing profits of the industry, which is the blue line on the left, is accompanied by a trend of declining tax rates, which is the red line. And because much of these profits end up in high-income countries, the harms disproportionately burden people in low and middle-income countries. The industry can also be characterized as neo-colonial, and one that is undermines sustainable development and worsens inequality. Let's move to the second domain. Across the world, households are increasingly forced to live in systems that devalue or undervalue the time required to provide proper care for infants and young children. Care work, in general, is central to human survival and flourishing and is mostly done by women, but it is ignored by mainstream economic accounting despite the value of unpaid care work estimated to be around 20 to 40% of GDP. Similarly, breastfeeding is rarely included in official food production accounts, despite the monetary value of women's milk production to be around 3.6 trillion US dollars. This treatment of breastfeeding as a free or costless activity or as a lifestyle choice, while formula is counted as meaningful food production and included in GDP calculations, is a perverse and nonsensical structural fault line, as you can imagine. It undermines breastfeeding and fosters a dependency on formula, and it helps divest governments of their responsibility for safeguarding the rights of children and women. Indeed, the coverage of maternity rights and protection and provision of breastfeeding support in the workplace setting remains dismal and inadequate globally, making it difficult or impossible for millions of women to breastfeed, a problem not only compounded by the rising level of women working in precarious and underpaid work, but also increasing numbers of women working in the informal sector. Finally, we come to the health sector, where we raise three interconnected issues. First, we highlight the problem of patriarchal and biomedical cultures that hinder culturally sensitive and women-centric maternity care, that encourages or intrusive and interventionist obstetric practices that undermine breastfeeding, and contribute to the unacceptable lack of attention to breastfeeding in the core curriculum of health professional training. Second, we note that the rise of or normalization of public-private partnerships and the increasing commercialization and privatization of health systems as trends that foster a more unquestioning acceptance of industry influence over health education, research, and the development of clinical guidelines despite clear conflicts of interest. And finally, we identify inadequate public budgets that leave health systems under-resourced as a major structural barrier to breastfeeding, and argue that greater amounts of public finance and investment can be generated responsibly without causing economic instability, echoing conclusions made by WHO's Council on the Economics of Health for All. And that is paper 3. And as you have seen, we've covered a lot in this series, and each paper has its own set of recommendations, but I will end my presentation by presenting the 6 cross-cutting recommendations of the entire series. First, parents, health professionals, and society more broadly must be given correct information about infant behavior and breastfeeding, and the support needed to breastfeed. Second, there must be stricter regulation of marketing. Indeed, we call for an end to the commercial marketing of all food products for children, while strengthening implementation of the code. Third, everyone should have a more complete understanding of the industry as a whole, including about the sophistication of its political and marketing strategies and its broader social, economic, and environmental negative impacts. Fourth, we know that baby-friendly, women-centered, and culturally appropriate maternity care will improve breastfeeding, so proper investment in these and a trained and empowered workforce to implement the stronger code among the other package interventions in the package of protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding is needed, and ending conflict of interest is a must. Fifth, it is unacceptable that so much of the work and responsibility for breastfeeding is left on the shoulders of mothers and women. The value of care work must be incorporated into economic accounting systems and policies. The unbalanced gender distribution of care work must be corrected, and investment in maternity protection and baby-friendly work environments must be prioritized. But finally, unless the imbalance in power between private actors with an interest in expanding formula consumption and those with a duty and mandate to protect the rights of children and mothers is corrected, little will change. Shifting power to correct this imbalance is ambitious and may be considered utopian, but by working across multiple policy areas and through broader multidisciplinary coalitions, we believe it is possible. It's not just about infant and young child feeding, it's about the impact of commercial interests on child development and society more generally. It is about the economic power used by the formula industry to the detriment of health and rights. Our vision is a world where parents and families are supported in the care of their infants, and for breastfeeding to be robustly promoted and supported and protected at all levels. I will end by showing these links to some of the tools that we've developed to support advocacy on the cost of not breastfeeding, on the Mother's Milk tool, which assigns an economic value to milk production, and on the green feeding tool to help calculate the carbon offsets if we were to more collectively protect, promote, and support breastfeeding. And that ends my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all a good day.
As we continue on this topic of breastfeeding, adapting to climate change and disasters, allow me to introduce our speaker. She's a graduate of medicine at the University of the East, Ramon Magsaysay Medical Center. She had her master's in public health at the University of Adelaide in South Australia. And then she had her Doctor of Philosophy in Epidemiology and Population Health at the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia. For further training, she had a residency in obstetrics and gynecology, as well as her fellowship in obstetric and gynecologic ultrasound at the Philippine General Hospital. Currently, she is a Professor 5 at the University of the Philippines College of Medicine, an attending consultant at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology of the Philippine General Hospital, and a University Scientist 1 and research professor at the National Institutes of Health, of Child Health and Human Development. She is a fellow of the Philippine Obstetrical and Gynecological Society and the Philippine Society of Ultrasound in Obstetrics and Gynecology. Dear colleagues, join me in welcoming Dr. Erlidia F. Llamas Clark.
Good day, everyone. I am Dr. Llamas Clark, and today I am tasked to begin the session on breastfeeding and nutrition, adapting to climate change and disasters. The following are the session objectives, and I will be focusing on Objective 1 to determine the interconnection of environment, climate change, and infant nutrition by defining climate change, greenhouse gases, disasters, and presenting climate change, disasters, and food and nutrition security frameworks, including other relevant theoretical frameworks, and discuss the significance of putting maternal and child nutrition in the policy agenda. This is the outline of this part of the session. I'd like to begin by looking at this conceptual framework of how global environmental and climate change will affect health in general and women and children's health in particular. And this is coming from a socio-ecological perspective. The understanding of our bigger systems is important in the discussion of our session objectives. Human health is directly affected in many ways by heat, stress, injuries, death, mental health stresses, infections, and even undernutrition, which can also be consequences. Indirectly, climate change have consequences from air pollution and extreme weather events that can bring climate-related disasters. In addition, it has indirect impacts to health through the physical and food systems pathways and ecological links that are either economically or socially mediated. All these effects will depend on the health system's collective and individual vulnerability, which can lead to negative health outcomes if we do not intervene. But what is really climate change? It is a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere in addition to natural variability observed over comparable time periods. When we talk of climate change, it refers to variations and long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns which can either be natural, like the sun's activity or having volcanic eruptions. And with all these, greenhouse gas emissions happen. When we talk of these gases, they are the gases in the Earth's atmosphere: water vapors, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and ozone, which inadvertently heats our environment, causing increasing in temperature. We have to remember that in our long-term existence as humans, we have to be interconnected with nature, such that any change in any of the factors that will affect our physical or social environment can affect and cause other areas and conditions to also change. So climate change has been part of our planet Earth's history. However, humankind has been increasing the demand for the Earth's resources, and since the 1800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, which has coincided with the Industrial Revolution. There has been so much demand for large-scale manufacturing of goods and commodities that it has increased the use and burning of our fossil fuels, such as coal, oil, and gas, which has produced these greenhouse gases that is warming the world at a faster rate and pace. Hence, human activities lead to climate change, and this is referred to as the Anthropocene age. The effects of a changing climate from human activities causes the physical environmental changes and exposes the global populations to many natural and man-made hazards. If unchecked, these hazards may end up in disasters. So what do we mean by disasters? They are serious disruptions to the functioning of a community that exceeds its capacity to cope using its own resources. So, these combined hazards may pose major threats to public health as it intensifies the prevailing environmental health disparities in many communities worldwide. We also have to factor in some social determinants of health. Also, the climate-related events will impact public reproductive health and maternal health outcomes that may have long-term effect to the health and well-being of the current population and also affect the survival of future generations. So, in 2002, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change noted the impacts, so 2022, noted the impacts of increasing temperatures and heat, and it is associated with higher rates of preterm birth, low birth weight, stillbirth, and neonatal stress. Also, extreme weather events are associated with reduced access to prenatal care. Hence, we must include the vital role of women in making sure that infant nutrition and health is preserved. So I move along to another climate change area of concern that is vital to health, and that is food and nutrition security. So, women, infants, and children are more vulnerable to climate impacts and can be disadvantaged, particularly with their nutrition and health, when they are living in poor resourced countries. What we know is that breastfeeding is crucial for child health and development, and that there is a need to protect and support breastfeeding, particularly in climate related disaster events. So, here I have the UNICEF conceptual framework and the determinants of maternal and child nutrition that has been modified in 2020. What you can see here is that we need to make sure that all these immediate, underlying, and enabling determinants are addressed for us to have good maternal and child nutrition and health outcomes. So going back in 2015, based on this UNICEF framework on malnutrition and incorporating the climate and health pathway concepts of social vulnerability and resilience, I applied this to disasters and developed an integrated operational framework by combining these elements and in particular looking at the extreme weather events of typhoon and cyclone related flooding disasters in the Philippines. As you can see, climate change and extreme weather events will affect household food security through food supply, access, and use. These determinants of food security will have an impact on nutritional status of children. Food access is also central and will impact the care for mothers and children, which in turn affects the health status and disease states, which will end up also affecting the nutritional status. While there are many determinants working underneath these immediate causes, malnutrition, household, and maternal characteristics, and the experiences of women in maintaining nutritional outcomes of children after an extreme weather event will certainly play a huge role. Indeed, in this issue of adapting breastfeeding and nutrition to climate change, I would like to highlight the importance and the role of women in these special circumstances. Climate change induced food insecurity indeed stems from lack of food availability, quality, and access, which prevents women, infants, and children from meeting their nutritional needs and receiving the primary health care that they need, such that it puts a risk to their health and development. So, when pregnant women do not meet their nutritional needs, then their health and well being is also compromised and negatively affected, with an increased risk of delivering low birth weight babies and those with long term adverse health outcomes. Also, there's lack of available safe and clean water due to frequent and severe droughts, and the breakdown of sanitation, particularly in disaster events, lead to food insecurity. Maternal, fetal, and neonatal and child health are also easily affected from the increasingly frequent outbreaks of infectious diseases, which may be related to climate change or its consequent disasters that will be important to maintain child health, such that alterations in the physical and social environmental conditions related to climate can increase the transmission of water, air, and foodborne diseases that has the potential to increase the burden of malnutrition. Therefore, breastfeeding offers the infants and young child the food and nutrition security needed that has to be packaged with good women and maternal health support. As such, breastfeeding is fundamental to protect and support child health and development. This is more evident during climate related events, and with breastfeeding, you are assured to have improved survival, health, and human capital outcomes. This also reduces the risk of childhood infections such as diarrhea, pneumonia, and even premature mortality. For breastfeeding mothers, it also has benefits as it reduces the risk of postpartum hemorrhage, depression, and even premature mortality from diabetes and other chronic diseases. Now we know the tremendous benefits of breastfeeding. We need to advocate for its place in policies globally as a critical feeding practice for the health of both mothers and babies to foster health protection to the whole of humankind. At this stage, we need to recognize that human breast milk is the critical first food for children to be able to grow, survive, and thrive. It also helps reduce greenhouse gases and lessens the environmental impact of food alternatives and decreases food contamination from chemicals and microbiological agents, including food spoilage and wastage. So, for this objective, I conclude by stating that breastfeeding is a sustainable and green feeding practice, and we need to recognize that women's health and mothers' health needs to be supported and their nutrition and health as well is key, particularly being the actors in achieving optimum child health and nutrition in the era of climate change and during disasters. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Our last speaker, but definitely not the least, is also a graduate of the University of the Philippines College of Medicine. She had her pediatrics residency training at the Philippine General Hospital and fellowship in perinatal and neonatal medicine at the University of Toronto in Canada. She is currently the team co-lead on the development of clinician support tools for the Omnibus Health Guidelines on Child and Adolescent Screening, Alliance for Improving Health Outcomes. She is also a steering committee member, COVID-19 Living CPG3, University of the Philippines National Institutes of Health. She's also a consultant facilitator on essential intrapartum newborn care and Philippine Integrated Management of Acute Malnutrition, Kalusugan ng Mag-ina Incorporated. Dear colleagues, to talk about breastfeeding and nutrition, adapting to climate change and disasters, join me in welcoming Dr. Donna Isabel Capili.
Hello, this is Dr. Donna Capili. I would like to thank the organizers of this year's Breastfeeding Congress for the opportunity to speak on this topic, which is breastfeeding and nutrition, adapting to climate change and disasters. I'm really just going to pick up from where Dr. Clark left off from her very excellent lecture. So thank you very much, Dr. Clark. Okay, so for this part of the session, these are our objectives, which basically is to appreciate the environmental impact of breastfeeding and not, to describe the different stages in the disaster management cycle, as well as the activities necessary to optimize infant and young child feeding. So to start off, just a brief review of the evidence on the environmental impact of artificial infant formula. So the visual on the left-hand side actually shows the different multiple steps involved in the manufacture as well as in the consumption of infant formula. So it has been estimated that the production of a kilo of artificial formula actually emits 4 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents in greenhouse gases to our atmosphere. Just to give a better idea of even how much a kilo of carbon dioxide equivalent is, refer to this picture of this little girl holding that visualization of a balloon having a kilo of carbon dioxide equivalent. So now imagine that per kilogram of artificial infant formula, there are 4 of these huge balloons with greenhouse gases that are actually floating up into our atmosphere, together with all the other causes of emissions of greenhouse gases, and they are forming a blanket over in our atmosphere and trapping the heat in. Therefore, global warming ensues, and we have climate change. So in the previous slides, we had mentioned about just one of the factors in the environmental impact of the manufacture of artificial infant formula. But then there's also the environmental cost when it comes to the preparation of formula for consumption. So when a kilogram of infant formula is prepared, it has been estimated that this will consume around 4,700 liters of water. Of course, part of the process is also boiling the water prior to the consumption. And it has been estimated that the energy cost for boiling water in formula preparation is around 1.5 million kilograms of carbon dioxide. And this applies for a child who is fully formula fed in the first year of life. Then there is packaging. There was a study in 2009 that reported that formula use had added around 86,000 tons of metal, 550 million cans, and also 364,000 tons of paper to landfills yearly. However, that was 2009. It is already 2023, and the formula industry is booming at a total of $5 billion every year. So you can just imagine how much more has been added into these landfills. Okay, so now compare the processes involved in the manufacture and in the consumption of breast milk via breastfeeding. So I think we don't need to say a lot anymore to say how much of an impact breastfeeding has in as far as our environment is concerned. But this is not to say that breastfeeding is zero carbon footprint. Of course, there is some carbon footprint involved because the mothers do have to eat, and the food that they eat, of course, will have to undergo processing as well. However, studies have shown that the dietary demands of a breastfeeding mother still trumps the environmental impact that is born out of the manufacture and consumption of artificial infant formula. So just a few more facts. Exclusively breastfeeding a baby for 6 months saves around 95 to 153 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalents compared to one formula-fed infant. And there has been data coming from the UK Environmental Protection Agency in that in their country, if babies were exclusively breastfed, that was already comparable to removing 50,000 to 77,500 cars from their roads every year. So huge, huge impact with breastfeeding alone. So again, I hope that we have an appreciation of the critical connection between breastfeeding and that of our environment. However, we are already faced with the reality of the effects of climate change. And this is evidenced by our extreme weather conditions, the super typhoons that we have been experiencing. So now this part of the session is about adaptive strategies to offset disasters' impacts on infant and young child feeding. So this is the disaster management cycle. A majority of us here would be familiar with this already. So for the rest of this session, we will go through the activities in each step of this cycle that are important to optimize infant and young child feeding. Okay. The first step in the disaster management cycle is that of mitigation. So mitigation includes activities that would lessen the impacts of disasters or emergencies. So These mitigation activities would be incorporated in the part of our day-to-day during the normal times, wherein we must conscientiously promote, protect, and support optimal breastfeeding. Exactly what is optimal breastfeeding? It has three components. This would be the initiation of that first breastfeeding within the first hour of life, and exclusively breastfeeding for that first 6 months, and continuing breastfeeding, and then coupled with appropriate complementary feeding past 6 months of age, with breastfeeding continuing up to 2 years or even beyond. So, in promoting, protecting, and supporting optimal breastfeeding, pre-positioning this during the normal times, not during the time of the disaster, we would already be taking an enormous step in securing the food source for the most vulnerable, especially when the disaster strikes. So, but it should go without saying that we as health professionals cannot simply pass the buck to the mothers and expect them to save the world. No? It seems easy enough to tell women that they have to breastfeed and therefore have the power to create that difference. But the fact is, there are many, many barriers to women in our world today, barriers to them successfully breastfeeding. So, and these barriers are at times beyond their control. So we cannot just simply tell women to breastfeed. No? They cannot do this alone. Government, society, we need to step up. No? This framework from the Lancet, just this 2023, illustrates the structural as well as the settings-based determinants that are important towards the achievement of the goals in infant feeding. If you look at the top of this slide, it actually enumerates the three which I have mentioned, which are components of optimal breastfeeding: timely initiation within that first hour, exclusive breastfeeding, and also continued breastfeeding. So when we achieve these goals, it will actually bring about a twofold impact. That is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, which is not even within the disaster management cycle, but in the broader range of environmental protection. But then zoning into the disaster time, if we are able to secure this feeding source for our babies, then even the most vulnerable will be protected during the time of disaster. So all of us here have a continuing responsibility in our facilities and our workplaces, as well as our community settings. We can see here all the policies, just some of them that I have listed down that are quite relevant when it comes to infant and young child feeding and breastfeeding. We know these policies for sure. Everyone attending this breastfeeding congress should be well aware of them as well. However, that I think is the problem. We are all well aware, but there is a lack in implementation. There is a lack in willful action. So now we have our work cut out for us. In the Philippines, the exclusive breastfeeding rate is 41%, and this is per NDHS in 2022. And that means that when disaster strikes, potentially 6 out of 10 infants would be food insecure. So optimum breastfeeding, infant and young child feeding really has to be pre-positioned during the normal times. So in the preparation phase, it is imperative to draw the disaster risk reduction plans, to enjoin a community and to strengthen their capacity in disaster response. In our country, during the times of disaster, the various sectors have their own clusters. What does this mean? For nutrition, for example, there is the National Nutrition Cluster made up of different actors, both government and non-government. But this group at the national level is spearheaded by the National Nutrition Council, co-chaired with the UNICEF. So they are primarily tasked with the update, with the development of policies during the time of disaster. And these are then trickled down towards the other sub national levels of the cluster at the regional as well as the local government levels. So there is a lot of work that is being done during the preparation phase, and there is no room for complacency. So the core programs around which preparatory activities focus on during this time are infant and young child feeding in emergencies, on the Philippine Integrated Management of Acute Malnutrition or PMAM, on micronutrient supplementation, also on food or dietary assistance or making arrangements for that. And then I added here nurturing care, which is actually an offshoot from RA 11148 or the Kalusugan ng Magnanay Act. So basically, the activities surrounding these programs would involve policy development, review and update, information management, very importantly, to train and capacitate staff, establishing coordination mechanisms not only within the sector but outside of the sector, logistics management, engaging the community, and also driving advocacy. Typically, after a disaster, there's a public outpouring of support and donations which occur. Post Yolanda in Villamor Air Base, we saw these rows and upon rows of formula, bottles of formula, and then the powders already scooped in. And there were accompanying mineral water bottles as well. And this was being given as part of general distribution. And that was unfortunate since in that experience, we found that 8 out of 10 children less than a year old were actually still having breastfeeding. No? And then 8 out of 10 infants less than 6 months were also still being breastfed. And the handouts of artificial formula were seriously undermining the mother's breastfeeding. And so this is why we should be actively mindful of the milk code in the normal times, but especially so during times of emergencies. The ideal is that the health system accounts for those who need artificial formula and supervises the safety of preparation as well as their supply availability of formula. So provision of artificial formula is strictly on individualized assessment. So contrary to popular belief, there is space for formula feeding during times of emergencies, but again, this is based on individual assessment. Therefore, artificial formula is never for general distribution because it will definitely, again, undermine breastfeeding and potentially introduce other health risks for the infants and children, such as diarrhea. In these not infrequent situations, post-disasters, as you can see here pictured in front of you, access to even clean water is difficult. And definitely, this is no place for formula feeding. So it should be that state actors responding to the emergency have to supervise and intervene when it comes to artificial formula feeding in order to minimize the risks involved with this type of feeding. So now let me talk about a very important part of the response when it comes to infant and young child nutrition during disasters. Now, this is the creation of supportive spaces. These physical spaces give refuge to mothers and children, whether breastfeeding or not. No? It's sort of a one-stop shop, so to speak, in which the needs of the mothers from across the sectors are provided so that they can care for their own children. So it is in these spaces wherein there is the protection and the strengthening of IYCF practices. There's a support of child development and also that of optimizing the caregiver and child relationship and also improving the overall well-being of the caregivers. So it has almost been 10 years since our Nanay Bayanihan tent went up in Villamor Air Base to welcome the mothers and children coming from the C-130 planes from the Yolanda-stricken Region 8 and other areas. No, so it all started with a small space with some mats and blankets, and then we were fortunate enough to have generous donors, and eventually from those mats and blankets, we had a tent that went up in that campsite in Villamor Air Base. And then due to the demand for counselors, and that was such an overwhelming experience after Yolanda, wherein even healthcare workers were victims or survivors of the event. So there was so much demand for people to help, and I cannot overemphasize the huge efforts made by the mother volunteers during this endeavor. So it was a time for government and non-government to put their hands together and work together for these mothers and their children. It was also in large thanks to the support of the National Nutrition Council, as well as the many local governments nutrition offices that pitched in towards this effort. So the Nanay Bayanihan space was a supportive space. It was a space for counseling mothers, also in assisting them with primary and secondary breastfeeding issues. It was a space for medical screening for both mothers and also their children. It was a space for play, and then eventually seeing the needs of the breastfeeding dyads there. It also became a repository for donor pasteurized milk. And this was as a result of networking from other hospitals such as Fabelia and PGH at the time. So the activities that you see here were not limited to Villamor. There were outreach activities that were conducted as well in other disaster-afflicted areas such as in Cebu and also in Palawan. From that experience and onwards then of providing that supportive space in Nanay Bayanihan, we derive now the key components of the supportive space that encompass the cross-sectoral services. So not only from nutrition, but also services from the health sector, from protection, education, and WASH, as you see here listed in front of you. And to operationalize all these, there should be updated and relevant protocols in place. Very important for the staff to be trained and also up to date with their competencies, and they have to be complemented with the right equipment and supplies. And also very important as well, a mechanism for referral across the sectors. And this therefore highlights the importance of coordination. Okay, so as the acute disaster situation stabilizes, we now go into the recovery stage. And there is a need to re-examine whether these supportive spaces still need to continue on, because remember, these are temporarily set up for that emergency phase. So therefore, it begs to be considered that there has to be a plan to transition the services back to regular programming as offered within the public services of the local government. So this is not only for nutrition services, but across the sectors, as we had discussed in the previous slide. So therefore, what are the takeaways from this experience? It really should be that in the normal times, we need to be conscientiously doing our efforts in promoting, protecting, and supporting optimal breastfeeding. And there is also the need for better coordinated and implemented infant and young child feeding in emergencies response within and across sectors. There is a need for periodic training of our human health resources and also supportive supervision. Sometimes kasi pagka wala na dun sa disaster, there's a decay of the skills. So there has to be a continuous training in order to ensure competencies. Institutionalization of mother support groups is also a desired thing, no? And other community-based organizations and stakeholders, so that they have a definite role and a definite space in disaster response. It's good to have continuing dissemination and conscientious implementation of the milk code. Again, cannot overemphasize that fact. So these are the main takeaways from this session. So to end, these are my references, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much to our distinguished speaker. We would like to welcome back Dr. Leia Plusana together with our esteemed speakers to the virtual floor for our question and answer forum.
All right, thank you once again. We're just so glad that the delegates are still here with us. Those are really such a great and informative series of lectures that we have had so far. So welcome now to our question and answer session. We now have our distinguished panelists here with us to entertain your questions. So this is actually live, and we have received quite a number of questions from you, and we appreciate that. So once again, you can see now your speakers here before you. So let us now start our question and answer session. So we'll just go right into it. So we now have our first question from the audience, and this is for Dr. Paul. Dr. Zambrano, what are the concrete actions that professional associations or health professionals in the Philippines do in response to the alarming findings in the Lancet BF series?
Thank you for the question. Just sound check. Can you hear me well? Okay. Yeah, thanks for that question. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I think the first is we already know, right? We have your direct health system intervention, which is unang yakap. It should be scaled up and implemented as much as possible in all hospitals in the country. Second is, let's look at our pre-service and in-service training curriculum. Are we teaching breastfeeding and infant and young child nutrition in the most updated and comprehensive way, including the counseling skills that are required for breastfeeding mothers? Third is, this is the most difficult part, right? We need to kind of take a look at ourselves in the mirror and do a critical re-examination of our relationship with the commercial milk formula companies. How do we attack this fundamental conflict of interest, and how do we challenge this institutional conflict of interest that is pervasive up to this day? It's not an easy discussion to have. It's very difficult, but I think it's needed for us, for the health professional associations and health professionals in general, to not be part of the problem. But there has to be a reckoning first and a recognition that, yes, there is this fundamental conflict of interest. There is this problem that we need to tackle. I think until that happens, it's going to be very challenging. Over.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Paul. No, I hope that answers the question from our audience. Okay, let's now proceed to the next question. This is for Dr. Stella Jose. Regarding HIV/AIDS, according to the WHO, mothers with HIV cannot breastfeed. But according to the DOH, if the mother is under treatment or medication, they can. So can we have clarification regarding this, Dr. Stella?
Yes, that is the recommendation now, because the benefits of breastfeeding outweighs the risk. The mother, if she's on antiretroviral therapy and also the baby is on ART, there's no harm in doing breastfeeding for the baby. So let's remove that concept that they cannot breastfeed. That's a wrong concept.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Stella, for correcting that misconception. So I believe that that's an eye opener to our listeners. Follow-up question: do we have a program in PGH supporting adolescent mothers?
Yes, Yes, we have a program in PGH, and all the adolescent mothers or adolescent pregnant women, they are given free medicine, the ART, because we are a hub, we are an HIV hub, and so they just have to consult it. They will be their names will be recorded, and they will have consistent medicines. Every 3 months, they're going to get their supply of ART.
Okay, thank you for that, Ma'am Stella. Question to Dr. Libadia. What are the requirements now for a milk bank?
Thank you for that question, and thank you for that's great for your intention to establish a human milk bank. It would be better, for the preparation that you would have this training. The Human Milk Bank Association of the Philippines hold a training for those who would like to have human milk bank. So it would be best to write a letter, hmbapinc@gmail.com, for your intention to establish a human milk bank, and there you would learn. So you have this concept, the physical facility, the equipments, the pasteurizer, the refrigerator, the freezer, and then the laminar hood. So marami siya, and then the manpower, the staff. So dapat din ready, and you need to undergo this training.
Yeah, okay. So for the one who asked that question and others who are interested in putting up a milk bank in their hospital, there are really quite rigid requirements, and it's also quite a lot, and even requires training, as Dr. Libadia has mentioned. So you can get in touch with her for the details, even after this Congress. So let's now proceed to our next question to Ms. Glo Almariego. This question is for you. What are the usual problems or concerns that nurses encounter in promoting breastfeeding in the wards?
Actually, madali po yung mga ginagawa ng nurses kasi use na sila talaga para sa promoting ng breastfeeding. Ang problema lang po talaga yung mga pasyente kasi pag dumarating sa amin, hindi po sila oriented. Lalo na yung mga walk-in, yung mga imminent na nanganganak, hindi sila galing OPD. Actually, pag galing OPD yan, lahat sila na-orient. May orientation doon, mayroong health teachings, at saka alam nila talaga na mother baby friendly hospital kami, na hindi kami nag-aalaw ng bote. Sometimes, makikita namin na meron pa rin silang tinatagong mga bote. Ang biro nga ni Director doon sa interview sa kanya, yung aming detector, hindi detector ng metal, detector ng milk formula at saka ng buttermilk. Yung mga bottles ng milk. Pero joke lang yun. Kaya yung ginagawa namin talaga mahigpit talaga yung mga security guards. Ganun din sa mga nurses at saka yung mga nursing staff na umiikot. Tapos siguro yung sa lactation, kasi meron kaming lactation nurse na talagang nagpa-follow up sa mga pasyente. Kaya lang ngayon, yung nurses na talaga at saka yung mga midwives ang gumagawa ng mga lactation nurses. Isa pa, yung pangatlo siguro, talaga ang mahirap yung magkapid. Up to this time, talagang mahirap talaga siya. Kasi sa dami ng neonates namin, yung neonates namin talaga ICU caring talaga sila, hindi sila. Kasi lahat ng babies na normal babies nasa wards, nakatabi sa baby, naka-room-in. Ito kahit na meron silang antibiotic. Dati noon, hindi kami, yung mga may antibiotic nasa nursery. Pero ngayon, nung dumadami talaga, yung mga may antibiotic, yung mga kailangan ng sunlight, yung mga mayroong konti lang na complications, nasa ward na sila. Kaya naka-room-in lahat dyan. Tapos yung sa mga nursery naman, actually, ang capacity namin is only 45. But ang babies namin na naka-confine doon, like today, nasa 70 sila. So lahat yun na naka-NCT, yung mga ibang naka-active din nila. Kaya yung mga challenges, talagang kung sa mga employees, walang masyado. Ang lang doon, hirap kasi konti lang yung staff namin. Actually, ang mga nurses, ang dami din ang dami rin umaalis. Siyempre, gusto nila yung magandang future nila, nag-abroad dahil open na yung mga ibang countries natin. Pero so far, ang mga ang ginagawa namin dyan, lahat ng yung LMT namin, lagi kami meron kami lactation management training. Ito ay na binibigay namin sa mga bagong nurses, sa mga interns, sa mga bagong residents. Kaya tulong-tulong, hindi kasi to pwedeng one man done na isa lang ang mag-lead. Kundi lahat kami cooperative talaga. From the start sa OPD hanggang pumunta ng wards, hanggang pumunta ng ICU, meron pa rin yung mga programs na talagang sinusunod namin.
So it would seem na talagang ginagawa ng lahat ng mga nurses,
Yes.
ng mga lives. And this is good to hear, no, Ma'am Glo, that efforts really being taken in our nursery, even in the ICU, those who are critical.
Yes, po.
Hindi hindrance yun to breastfeeding, right? Yun. Sige. So, yeah, let's now proceed to the next question, no? This one is for Dr. Kapili. Are there programs for the barangay health worker in promoting breastfeeding in times of disasters? Donna?
Yes, thank you for that question. Actually, yes, there are programs. As already explained, no, in the talk a while ago, it is actually a part, no, of that disaster plan. And katulad ng na-emphasize kanina, it's very important na hindi pa nung time ng disaster, but actually during the normal time na nagkakaroon ng ensayo, no, or training for competencies ng mga barangay workers, particularly to, no, yung mga BNS, no, yung mga barangay nutrition scholars. So these are all already being enforced, no, or implemented during that time ng normalcy. The only issue that arises, or not the only, but one of the big ones, is kung nagkaroon man ng emergency in their area and these health workers are actually affected by the emergency itself, no? And this is exactly what happened in, the wide-scale disaster that Yolanda was, for example, so that they needed help from elsewhere. And therefore the cluster response, no? But that's a different thing altogether now, what I'm talking about. But yes, the short answer is yes. There is training available at the barangay level. Yun lang. Thank you.
So Donna, that's good to hear, ano? So even in the midst of disasters, breastfeeding continues. Yeah. All right. So for our next question, no, for Dr. Clark, no, how do we convince mothers that nutrients in breast milk is superior to milk formula? Kasi parang nga, as even in reported I think yesterday, no, or kanina, ang daming list ng mga components ng milk formula na parang talaga mabibighani sila. So how do we still convince them that despite this long list of components, that breast milk is still superior?
Thank you for that, Dr. Leah, and everybody. No, so in the POGs, like, because I'm talking about here the situation of like climate change disasters and how it affects breastfeeding. Now, I'd like to tell everyone that our obstetrician gynecologists have been very equipped with breastfeeding, no, during disasters. Like we've had webinars and making sure that from the last maybe 7 years, the POGS has had a lot of cascading of information on the ground to make sure that the advocacy of climate change, disasters, and even environmental concerns that would affect women and their children are cascaded down, no, to the local level. So when it comes to breastfeeding, what we really need to do is like from the prenatal itself, no, and even like preconception counseling, we should really emphasize that. And I think that's something that we're trying to strengthen, no, and so that when some of these disasters happen in times of calamities, the mothers, our women, are really very convinced that breast milk is still the safest, most nutritious and reliable food, no, for the baby. And infants, no, less than 6 months. And as far as emergencies, no, and disasters are concerned, we do also have all the policies in place, and of course, there's a lot of things to be done at the level of the, say, the community or local government. So from where we sit, from the obstetricians helping out, of course, all the rest of the allied health workers. The vision is really to make sure that health workers are well equipped to support mothers and the children, no, during times of calamities, no, and disaster. And with the it's not only during disaster, but as what Dr. Kapili has said, we really need to work around the disaster management cycle, no? So without the disasters as yet, we are already planting the seeds, no, from what Ma'am Glo has said, that all the hospitals are having all these lactation management courses. We're making sure that well, they should actually be available on the ground when disasters happen, because this is where all this undermining of all our efforts happen, when we come around and uh, breast milk is sort of like undermined by milk formula that are being masqueraded as donations, no, but it's not always something that we think about, because we think of food access and availability, but something that we need to really consciously equip our women, that they are capable. They're very capable, even in the face of disasters, that they can provide and be resilient in making sure that their infants, particularly the newborns, like actually we have like a lot of preterm births happening. No, we have a lot of deliveries that happen during the time, so that our women are really capable to be able to feed, no, the best food for their infants and children. Okay, so I think if we strengthen that, uh, giving them information, and there's a lot of things going on, particularly with lay fora now. It's just a matter of really keeping continuous and consistent advocacy along these, so that when something happens, whether we're talking about pre-disaster and during the disaster, it becomes second nature to everyone, that it's still the best food, and we have food security, nutrition security. Okay.
Yes. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
that, Dr. Clark. I think Dr. Zambrano would like to add something, regarding the composition of breast milk and the composition of milk formula. So, Dr. Zambrano, can you add to that?
Sure. Yeah, so this is really quick, no? So the marketing material, if you look how it's written, it implies that the science behind commercial milk formula is making formula getting closer and closer and closer to breast milk in terms of composition. But if you look at the actual science, not the corporate science, it's the opposite. We're learning even more about breast milk, and the more we learn about breast milk, the gap between breast milk and formula widens even more. So we're understanding na mas malayo pa talaga ang formula sa breast milk than even before. So even in things like, they market these like human milk oligosaccharides, something like that, saying like there are 2 of them in this formula, but there are actually hundreds in human milk, as if adding these 2 things makes it almost close to breast milk. That's just one example. There are many more, right? But yeah, just the key message is we're learning even more about breast milk, and the more we learn, the more we appreciate just how far it is from formula, and that's just the breast milk, not even the act of breastfeeding and the benefits of that with the skin to skin and bonding, etc.
Yeah, but Dr. Paul, but that's the message that they're now trying to convey, that it's now becoming closer and closer to breast milk. So you're saying that this is not really the case?
No, it's not. It is not. In fact, if you look at our marketing regulations, the International Code, even EO 51, it's very clear there that marketing should never imply equivalence between the two, or should never imply that one is commercial milk formula is close to breast milk, close to maternal milk, etc. So the global community is aware that this is one of the marketing tactics, but it's actually supported by science. It is a misleading claim and not backed up by science.
Okay, so actually with what you said, Dr. Paul, no, it's giving me goosebumps, and I hope that our listeners realize that, no, that's one of the key points now, that very important key point that we have gathered from this Q&A, no. So it's far from the truth. Yeah. So Dr. Clark mentioned something about milk donation, about breast milk donation. So I don't know if Dr. Au will be the one to answer this. I think it's the two questions are related. How do you organize breast milk donation drive? And can you guys comment on yung mga mothers daw na binebenta ang kanilang breast milk sa social media instead of donating it to medical facilities? So can maybe Dr. Au can comment on this, or even the others who have some knowledge about this. Social media. Sige nga, Dr. Au.
Yeah, thank you for that relevant question. Number one, the milk drive, we usually coordinate with the local government units, or even the Manila City Health Office or Pasay or the other LGUs, or even in Laguna or Cavite. So we coordinate with them. We usually the source of funds, they are from the LGUs, and then we just prepare ourselves, not the supplies, equipments, not the containers, the coolers. No, we want to ensure the quality and safety of the milk. Of course, the staff, the human milk bank staff, and then the LGU, sila na yung bahala dun sa mga mothers who would donate. And of course, very important, no, the screening. So we screen those mothers, and we have this standardized questionnaire from the Human Milk Bank Association of the Philippines. And there we make sure kung pass sila, and we examine then the mothers. And then they would, of course, hand washing and collection of the human milk. And then there we are prepared with the coolers and then the transport. And for the online or the commercial, yeah, we discourage that. Actually, probably they have reasons, no, but we want to ensure the safety and quality of human milk with regards to getting donor milk. Of course, diba, the hierarchy of feeding, the WHO, mother direct breastfeeding, mother's own milk, then the donor preferably pasteurized. If it's a donor, ang ano niyan, dapat immediate relative sana, we or a friend na kilala mo, we ensure the lifestyle, no, we ask yung lifestyle niya. And then yun nga, minsan kasi sa commercial donor milk, no, may article kasi na 10% doon ay milk formula, no, and then dapat kasi ma-screen for the serologic testing, ganun, ma-interview pa siya. So we discourage yung commercial sharing, yung buying of the so sana nga dun sa human milk bank, sana, no, kasi we prioritize the small babies, di ba? Dapat hindi sila manghingi, dapat mother's own milk. So yun yung the best. Siguro empowerment and health teaching, no? Dito na i-emphasize dito na we empower these women na kaya mo yan, and tuturuan ka ng tama kasi for attachment, mga ganun lang. So hopefully yun nga, mag-donate sa milk bank kasi mas sila yung nangangailangan. Thank you.
So yeah, I think Doc Lea, the importance of really
surrogate. Yes, Dr. Clark.
Yeah. Go ahead. In particular kasi nga it becomes an entry point, particularly, no, in the haste to actually respond, no. Some actually capitalize on the on the
Right.
disaster itself and then enter kasi we always think that like we have to provide at once mga life saving no life saving stuffs no like food no but it becomes really an entry for yun nga mga problems also and as what Dr. Ao said that we really need to make sure that the guidelines are in place, particularly if we are going to put up mga emergency donations. And I saw that Doc Donna said there na like breast milk substitutes kasi that's how they would put it no in terms of marketing or framing. Kasi there's a lot of things to be had when you put it in those kinds of words. So at the end of the day, we really need to just be a little bit more skeptical dun sa mga intentions, no? Kasi that's why the donation should really be screened. It should be somehow regulated and there should be relevant organizations who are entering into the emergency sites. In particular, when we do have disasters or emergencies like this, we need to understand that yung mga nasa loob din, like people who are inside the disaster area, are trying to adapt and and help themselves first in fact so we need to really ask what they need because like having also outside agencies or people can sometimes add to the burden of the locality so when it comes to that we really just need to be a little bit more sensitive on how we will give some of those sinasabi lang breast milk substitutes because the thing is we need to have our lactation experts, mga health workers who can really support the mothers during those times because as what we have been emphasizing, we need to make sure that women are empowered and increase their confidence that kasi they have also mental health issues sometimes no particularly if they just delivered in those kinds of situation we need to be very sensitive about what they really need but making sure that they are empowered and that they are able to feed and give them that opportunity to have that confidence to be mothers, during that time of crisis. Okay, and have some caring roles in that, particularly providing food for their child. No, thank you.
So thank you very much for those insights and for those thoughts that Dr. Clark shared with us. You know what? There are just a lot of questions still, no, especially in our doc-witty. Okay, so there are still a lot of questions, and we do apologize to our participants who have placed their questions there. In the interest of time, we have to cut our Q&A short, but we will do our best to have your questions reach our speakers, and hopefully we will be able to address these questions, no, at a later time, no. All right. So having said that, I believe that it is now time to once again thank our speakers for sharing their valuable time with us. And we would like now to read give our certificates of appreciation to all of them. And the certificate reads, we would like to award these certificates of appreciation, no? The Philippine Pediatric Society and the Philippine Obstetrical and Gynecological Society, together with the UPPGH, award these certificates of appreciation to Dr. Stella Marie Jose, Dr. Aurora Gloria Libadia, Miss Gloria Almariego, Dr. Paul Zambrano, Dr. Erlidia Llamas Clark, and Dr. Donna Isabel Capili for sharing their expertise as speaker for the 10th Philippine Breastfeeding Congress entitled Roadmap to Breastfeeding Success, Creating Systems for Lactation Support, held on August 10 and 11, 2023. And these certificates are signed by Drs. Libadia, overall chair of the Breastfeeding Congress, Stella Marie Jose, co-chair of the Breastfeeding Congress, Dr. Resty Bautista, chair of the Scientific Committee, Dr. Marisa Lukban, president of the Child Foundation of the Department of Pediatrics of UPPGH, Dr. Lourdes Capito, president of the Foundation of Reproductive Care, Dr. Teresa Ribaño, chair of the Breastfeeding Committee of the Philippine Pediatric Society, Dr. Flor T., president of the Philippine Pediatric Society, and Dr. Efren Domingo, president of the Philippine Obstetrical and Gynecological Society. And personally, I also would like to thank the organizing committee of the Breastfeeding Congress for their certificate of appreciation for being your moderator for the second day of the Congress. It has been a pleasure to be part of this program. Thank you very much. Also, we would like to present these certificates of appreciation to our sponsors for their continued support to the Breastfeeding Congress. These are Nature Earth, Metro Pharma, PG Scientific, and La Leche. And last but not the least, we would like to acknowledge and appreciate our breastfeeding mothers and colleagues for sharing their breastfeeding journey with us. So we would like to express our appreciation to the following: Dr. Vanessa Torres Tixon, Dr. Bea Ocampo Santos, Mr. and Mrs. Joshua and Corinne Pilotin, Dr. Armina Timbol, and Dr. Charity Joyce Santos. Thank you very much for sharing with us your breastfeeding journey. It's really very much appreciated and truly inspiring for all of us. Once again, we would like to thank, who else? Also, we would like to thank our sponsors, Nature Earth and Metro Pharma, for today's sponsored symposia. They will be presenting a lecture and an AVP in a while. And we would also like to thank PG Scientific and La Leche for sponsoring and supporting this 10th Breastfeeding Congress. So once again, thank you. It was really a pleasure to be a part of this program. And it's now time to announce our raffle winners. So are you still there, dear colleagues and participants? So let us now announce our winners for the raffle. And each winner will be awarded 500 pesos through their GCash. So you will be contacted by the organizing committee for your 500 pesos. So congratulations to our Day 2 winners. And these are, congratulations, Julie Fair Morales Dalida. Number 2 winner, Jenaline P. Rivera. Third winner, Mylene S. Cacuero. Fourth is Nerissa Esguerra Dominguez. Our fifth winner is Iris Buenaventura Munoz. Sixth is Angelique Colliantes. Seventh is Sofia Camille Alminaza. Eighth winner of 500 pesos, Dr. Jose Melvin Cosep. Ninth winner of 500 is Jasmine Haen Diaz. And finally, our 10th winner of 500 pesos, Jonacel Osorio Monzon. So once again, congratulations to all our raffle winners. Each has been pre-selected. These are our pre-selected registered participants who have won 500 pesos they have been pre-selected. So once again, congratulations to all of them. Before we close, no, we would like to remind everyone to answer the post-test and evaluation forms. You can access them by clicking on the tab and it will open at the end of the sessions. Also, I believe that the links are sent to your individual emails. Please answer them so that you will be able to receive your certificates of attendance. Now, next announcement. Very important announcement for those requesting for the e-handbooks, the breastfeeding handbook. This is a very important announcement, so please listen up. We would like to inform everyone that the e-handbook for the Breastfeeding Congress is no longer available online. I repeat, it's no longer available online. We are closing the link to the handbook. Instead, we will be sending a revised version of the e-handbook, okay, to your email for those who have been fully paid. Okay, so those who are fully paid registered delegates only. So just to the registered, fully paid registrants. So thank you very much for understanding. Lastly, no, for those fully paid registered delegates who watch the Congress via YouTube channel, please answer the post-test and evaluation forms sent as links to your emails to be able to claim your certificates. Okay, so those are our announcements. So once again, thank you very much and good afternoon to everyone.